This book, The Resilience, Resourcefulness, Hope, and Perseverance of a Family of 9 People, consisting of the father, mother, and 7 children, is written by Kemi Adebayo. It is about the power of positive mentality, not losing hope, and faithfulness. Main characters: 1. John Harper, the father, a middle-aged man working 2 jobs. 2. Alice Harper, the mother, a homemaker with a knack for budgeting and creative cooking. 3. Emily Harper, the eldest daughter, 16, helps with chores and part-time work. 4. Anna Harper, the second daughter, 14, responsible and academically gifted. 5. Tommy Harper, 10 years old, curious and inventive. 6. Billy Harper, the middle child, 8, loves sports and is always hungry. 7. One of the twins, 6 years old, artistic and sensitive. 8. Sophie Harper, one of the twins, 6 years old, loves animals and dreams of becoming a veterinarian. 9. Sammy Harper, the youngest, 5 years old, energetic and full of questions. Setting. The play setting is a small suburban town in the present-day small industrial community. The plot. The story follows the Harper family, focusing on the daily challenges of feeding a family of 9 on a tight budget. Themes: 1. Resilience, overcoming adversity through determination and creativity. 2. Family bonds, the strength and importance of family unity. 3. Community support, the power of community in helping individuals and families thrive. 4. Resourcefulness, finding innovative solutions to everyday challenges. 5. Hope and perseverance, maintaining hope and perseverance in the face of difficulties. Part 1. Chapter 1. Meet the Family. Alice Harper woke up before dawn, as she did every day. The first rays of sunlight barely hinted at the horizon, but Alice was already moving with purpose. She stretched her arms, feeling the familiar stiffness in her muscles from yesterday's labors. Living in a household of 9 meant every day was a marathon of chores and responsibilities, but Alice wouldn't have it any other way. Her family was everything to her. The Harper household was nestled in a modest neighborhood, filled with homes that had seen better days. The paint on their small 2-story house was peeling, and the yard needed attention, but it was home. Alice's husband, John, had bought the house 15 years ago when they were newlyweds, full of dreams and energy. Now it echoed with the sounds of their 7 children, each adding their unique melody to the symphony of family life. Alice moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake anyone. She reached the kitchen, her sanctuary, where she could be alone with her thoughts before the day's chaos began. She flipped the switch on the coffee maker and started preparing breakfast. Feeding 9 people was no small feat, and it required planning and precision. She took inventory of the pantry, noting the dwindling supplies with a sigh. Another trip to the grocery store was imminent. Scene 1. A typical morning. Alice Harper woke up before the sun, her internal clock finely tuned to the demands of her bustling household. The house was quiet, a brief lull before the storm of activity that would soon ensue. She quietly slid out of bed, careful not to wake John, her husband, who was still snoring softly. She took a moment to watch him, his face peacefully in sleep. John worked long hours at the factory, and the early mornings were their only time apart. Alice crept down the narrow hallway of their modest home, peeking into the bedrooms of her 7 children. Each child was a universe of their own, with unique quirks and personalities. She smiled softly at the sight of their sleeping forms, grateful for the fleeting moments of tranquility. In the kitchen, Alice started the coffee pot and began preparing breakfast. The aroma of brewing coffee soon filled the air, mingling with the scent of pancakes sizzling on the griddle. She set the table, knowing that in a few minutes her quiet kitchen would be filled with the chatter and laughter of her children. As the aroma of coffee filled the air, the first signs of life began to stir upstairs. Emily, the eldest at 16, was the first to descend the stairs. She moved with the grace and confidence of someone far older than her years, her long brown hair cascading down her back. "Morning, Mom," Emily said, stifling a yawn. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" Alice asked, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Yeah, but I've got that big test today. Kinda nervous," Emily admitted. "You'll do great. You're always prepared," Alice reassured her, placing a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of her. Next came Tommy, the energetic 10-year-old who never seemed to run out of questions or energy. He bounded into the kitchen, his curly hair a wild mess from sleep. "Mom, did you know that space is completely silent?" he asked, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Good morning to you too, Tommy," Alice laughed. "And yes, I did know that. Eat your breakfast, please." Scene 2, the morning rush. The rest of the children followed in quick succession. Anna, the 14-year-old bookworm. Billy, the mischievous 8-year-old. The twins, Sarah and Sophie, who were 6 and always inseparable. And finally, little Sammy, who at 5 was the baby of the family and the most doted upon. John appeared last, his heavy footsteps announcing his arrival. He was a tall man with a sturdy build, his face lined with the marks of hard work and sleepless nights. He greeted Alice with a kiss on the cheek and a grateful smile as she handed him his coffee. "Morning, love. How'd you sleep?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Like a log," Alice replied, leaning into him for a brief moment of solace. "But there's a lot to do today. I'll need to go grocery shopping and take Sammy to his doctor's appointment." "I can pick up extra hours at work if we need the money," John offered, concern etched in his voice. "We'll manage," Alice said firmly. "We've always managed." Breakfast was a whirlwind of activity, with Alice and John coordinating the children's schedules like a well-rehearsed dance. The kitchen was a flurry of activity as the family sat down for breakfast. Conversations overlapped as everyone shared their plans for the day. The twins argued good-naturedly over the syrup, while Mia chattered excitedly about her upcoming school project. Sophie, too young to participate in the chatter, watched with wide eyes, a small smile on her face. Alice moved around the table, ensuring everyone had what they needed. She listened to the children's stories, offering advice and encouragement where needed. Despite the chaos, she felt a deep sense of contentment. This was her family, her life, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. Scene 3. A moment of reflection. After breakfast, the children grabbed their backpacks and headed out the door. Emily left for school first, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Anna followed, her nose buried in a book even as she walked out the door. Tommy, Billy, and the twins were bundled off next, leaving Alice to focus on Sammy. John followed close behind to drive them to school. Alice stood in the doorway, waving them off. The house was quiet once more, a stark contrast to the lively morning rush. She took a moment to breathe, savoring the stillness. The day ahead was filled with errands, housework, and preparing meals, but for now, she allowed herself a few minutes of peace. She sat down at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of coffee in her hands. Feeding a family of 9 was no small task. It required careful planning, budgeting, and a lot of creativity. But Alice was up to the challenge. She had always been resourceful, finding ways to stretch their limited resources and make ends meet. As she sipped her coffee, Alice thought about the journey that had brought her here. She and John had married young, and their family had grown quickly. They had faced many challenges over the years, but they had always faced them together. Their love and commitment to each other and their children had seen them through the toughest times. Alice smiled, feeling a renewed sense of determination. She would do whatever it took to provide for her family and ensure they had everything they needed. She finished her coffee and stood up, ready to tackle the day. The house might be quiet now, but it wouldn't be for long. And that was just the way Alice liked it. Once the older children were out the door, Alice dressed up Sammy and prepared for their trip to the doctor's office. She packed a small bag with snacks and toys to keep him entertained and made a mental note of the errands she needed to run afterward. The grocery list was long, and Alice knew she would have to be strategic about what she bought to make the most of their limited budget. As she loaded Sammy into the car, Alice took a deep breath and glanced back at the house. It was a lot of work, but the love and joy her family brought her made every effort worthwhile. They were a team, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The day was just beginning, and Alice knew it would be filled with the usual mix of chaos, laughter, and love. But as she drove away from the house, she felt a surge of determination. Feeding a family of 9 was no small task, but Alice was ready to tackle it head-on, one day at a time. Chapter 2. Daily Struggles. Scene 1, the grocery trip. It was a dreary Thursday morning, and Alice Harper braced herself for her weekly grocery trip. With a family of 9 to feed, every visit to the store felt like a test of her ingenuity and patience. She parked the family's aging minivan and grabbed her meticulously organized list. Her heart pounded as she stepped into the supermarket, the familiar anxiety gnawing at her. Alice navigated the aisles with practiced precision. Her list was divided into sections: produce, dairy, meat, pantry staples. Each item had been carefully considered for its cost, nutritional value, and how far it could be stretched. She picked up a bag of apples and hesitated, checking the price per pound. After a moment, she opted for a smaller bag. Every penny saved counted. In the meat section, she faced a familiar dilemma. Protein was crucial for her growing kids, but meat prices were steep. She chose a family pack of chicken thighs on sale, knowing she could stretch it across multiple meals. She also grabbed beans and lentils, cheaper protein sources that would help balance their diet. Alice's cart filled up slowly, a mix of fresh produce, bulk items, and store brands. She mentally tallied the cost as she went, hoping to stay within budget. At the checkout, she handed the cashier a stack of carefully clipped coupons and watched the total decrease slightly. Even with the discounts, the final bill made her wince. Feeding 9 people on a limited income was a constant challenge. Scene 2, meal planning. Back at home, Alice unloaded the groceries and set to work on her weekly meal plan. The kitchen table was strewn with recipes, coupons, and her well-worn notebook. Dinner was the most challenging meal to plan. It needed to be nutritious, filling, and something everyone would eat. Alice flipped through her recipe binder and settled on a few staples: chicken stir-fry, spaghetti with homemade sauce, and a hearty vegetable soup. Each recipe was chosen for its ability to feed many with relatively few ingredients. She wrote out the plan, noting any prep work that could be done in advance. She marinated the chicken for tomorrow's stir-fry and chopped vegetables for the soup, every bit of preparation helping to make the evenings run more smoothly. As she worked, Alice couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. The meals were repetitive and lacked variety. She wished she could afford to provide more exciting dishes for her children, but the budget left little room for luxuries. Scene 3, the emotional toll. That evening, as the family sat down to dinner, Alice observed them with a heavy heart. The meal was nutritious and filling, but it was clear the kids were getting tired of the same dishes. Emily, her oldest, tried to mask her disappointment, but Alice could see it in her eyes. John noticed the tension and reached over to squeeze Alice's hand. "You're doing an amazing job, Alice," he said softly. "We're all grateful for everything you do." Alice managed a smile, appreciating his support. But the worry never fully left her. She couldn't help but wonder if the kids felt deprived, or if they noticed the constant effort she put into making ends meet. After dinner, Alice sat with the younger children as they did their homework. Sophie climbed into her lap, holding up a crayon drawing she had made at preschool. "Look, Mommy, it's our family." Alice examined the drawing, her heart swelling with love. Sophie had drawn everyone with smiling faces, gathered around a table laden with food. It was a child's innocent and optimistic view of their world. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Alice said, kissing the top of Sophie's head. "You did a wonderful job." Later, after the children were in bed, Alice and John sat in the living room, discussing the week's expenses. They had long given up on fancy nights out or new clothes. Every spare penny went towards the essentials. John looked at Alice, his eyes filled with concern. "We'll get through this," he said. "We always do." Alice nodded, though the worry gnawed at her. The daily struggle to feed her family was a challenge that seemed never ending, but she knew she wasn't alone. Together, with John and the children, they would find a way to manage. Chapter 3, the first crisis. Scene 1, unexpected news. It was a typical Tuesday morning, and Alice was in the middle of her daily routine. She had just finished packing lunches for the kids when the phone rang. The number displayed was from John's workplace. Her heart skipped a beat as she picked up the receiver. "Hello, this is Alice," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mrs. Harper, this is Mr. Thompson from the factory," came the voice on the other end. "I'm afraid I have some news regarding John's position here." Alice's grip tightened on the phone. What's happened? There's been a reduction in workforce hours due to the company's financial constraints. John's hours are being cut by half, effective immediately. The room seemed to spin around Alice. She leaned against the counter, struggling to process the information. "Thank you for letting me know," she managed to say before hanging up. John entered the kitchen just as she put down the phone. He took a look at her face and knew something was wrong. "What is it, Alice?" She relayed the conversation, her voice trembling. "John, your hours have been cut. We're going to lose half your income." John's face paled. "How are we supposed to manage with that? We're barely scraping by as it is." Scene 2. Facing the reality. That evening, after the children were in bed, Alice and John sat at the kitchen table with their budget spread out before them. They examined every expense, trying to find areas to cut back. But there was little to eliminate. Rent, utilities, and groceries consumed most of their income, leaving scant room for savings. "We'll have to make do," Alice said, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her. "We've faced hard times before. How? And we'll get through this too." John nodded, though his eyes were clouded with worry. "Maybe I should look for another job, something part-time to make up the difference." Alice squeezed his hand. "We'll find a way. We always do." Scene 3. Tightening the belt. The following weeks were a blur of adjustments and sacrifices. Alice redoubled her efforts to stretch every dollar. She scoured the internet for coupons, bought in bulk, and planned meals down to the last detail. The children noticed the changes but accepted them without complaint. Emily, ever the responsible eldest, took on more chores around the house. She started babysitting for neighbors to earn a little extra money. Danny and the twins also chipped in, helping with household tasks and looking after the younger ones. One night, as Alice prepared a pot of soup, she felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The constant worry and relentless effort were taking their toll. She sank into a chair, her hands trembling. John found her there, looking more tired than he had ever seen her. He knelt beside her, his eyes filled with concern. "Alice, you're doing too much. You need to rest." "I can't, John," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "If I stop, everything will fall apart." John hugged her tightly. "We're in this together. We'll find a way." Are you interested in knowing more about what happened in the story? Read the 172 pages book, The Resilience, Resourcefulness, Hope, and Perseverance of a Family of 9, available online at Amazon Kindle's books, or buy a copy at https:/pdcourse.com or at Amazon Kindles.